Welcome to our channel, $1 Million Made Easy. This channel was created for you. If you have no idea what your retirement might look like, the spreadsheets you're going to see on this channel can greatly aid you. We use one simple piece of advice from Warren Buffett. We put the money in an S&P 500 index fund and let it go over the decades and watch what can happen. You can get a huge financial education unlike any other by watching these videos because we use actual numbers. I like to watch other financial channels, and one of the guys I like to watch is Joe Kuhn. And he said the following: I've always had a financial plan. When you're in your savings years, it's actually very easy. You can save 15 or 20% or whatever. Look what he says next. Put it in the S&P 500 and let it grow for 35 years. So he agrees with Warren Buffett. But he continues on. He says, but it becomes graduate school when you're planning for retirement. It gets a lot more complex, a lot more moving parts, all interrelated. So I want to show you one of the spreadsheets that we use to show you this, how moving parts can really affect things. What I want to do is I'm going to clear this out. Let's take, for example, somebody that was a previous one I ran. Let's take somebody that's 44 years old, got 50,000 saved up, can save $400 a month, has expenses of $5,000 a month. So we're going to project ahead what that'll be. And we also need to know what the Social Security is going to be. Now, how are you going to know what a Social Security is going to be? Well, if you go to Social Security Quick Calculator, type in your birth date, your current earnings, it's going to kick out a rough estimate of what you might get at these different ages in $2025. So let's just go ahead and enter these numbers here. Let's say he's going to get $2,000 a month. We can change any of these, and that's what we want to show you is the moving parts, how everything drastically changes as you start messing with these numbers. So let's take, for example, you're going to retire at age 67. That's 23 years from now. Now, what we do on this channel is we use the returns for the S&P 500, just like Warren Buffett recommends, just like Joe Kuhn mentioned, and we project ahead what similar returns might do for you in the future. Nobody knows whether it's going to be a good set of years coming forward or a bad set or anything in between. So we want to look at all these different variables. And in the worst case scenario, using the worst numbers for the last 100 years from the returns, which would be, we got a 23-year period, that would be 1926 numbers, it looks like. It varies depending on if you had an 8-year run like in 2001, that'd be the worst case scenario because it ended up being 4 down years. If you look right here, it ended up being 3 down years and then ended up down 37. So that was in the last 100 years, that was the worst period. In this case, a 23-year period, the worst numbers would be using 1926 numbers. In that case, you'd have 469,000 using those numbers. That's the worst case scenario. The second worst would be 470 and so on. You can see I like to use 90% of the time what you would have. In other words, 10% of the time you had worse numbers than these, but at least 90% of the time you'd have at least these numbers, if not better. In fact, this would be the median and this would be the highest. So that's the range that potentially could happen using the numbers for the last 100 years, anywhere from 469,000 up to 2.761. I like to look at this column right here because that means 90% of the time you have at least this amount. Now, if you had this kind of amount after 23 years and started withdrawing. Now, how much are you going to withdraw? Again, the 5,000 that we're expecting right now, that's going to grow in the next 23 years. We grow that by a 3% inflation rate. You're going to need almost $10,000. Social Security, this 2,000 also gets a COLA. That's going to grow. We're going to grow it at 2.5%, which was this year's COLA. That's going to grow to this kind of number. And since you're taking at age 67, you get 100% of that. So we got the future expenses, we got the future Social Security. So in the future, you're going to need this kind of money from your nest egg. When you start withdrawing 6,339 from this right here, this 583,000, your money's going to run out at age 92, which is not too shabby. That means that the money would last 25 years. Now, watch what happens when we start changing some of these variables. That's what we're talking about right here. There's a lot of moving parts when you start messing with these numbers. Watch what happens if you want to retire at age 66 instead of age 67. Watch this one right here, 92. Money runs out at age 92. Now your money's running out at age 83. Just that 1 year made that much difference because I had one less year for this to grow. plus you're getting less from your Social Security. You're not getting 100% of that value, man. When you get 93.3, if we go to age 65, now we're running out of money at age 76. So what could we do differently? You could save more, but watch one simple thing you can do. We got $400 a month coming out all the way for the next, in this case, if we go from 44 to 65, it's for the next 21 years. What happens if we just increase that by 3% a year? Again, watch this number right now. Right now, 90% of the time you got your money lasting till age 76, but 10% of the time your money's running out at age 76 or younger. You can see the worst case scenarios going through here. This is the worst 10% right here. Running out at age 76. Watch what happens when I increase that by 3% a year, which means we're simply going to go, well, watch what the age is. Age 76 to age 78 didn't help that much, but it helped a little bit. So what else could we do differently? We could change the expected expenses. What happens if we go to 4,800? All we're doing is showing you all these different variables you need to take into account. Right now, you're running out of money at age 78. 90% of the time your money lasts till age 78. 10% of the time you're running out age 78 or less. Forgive me for misspeaking here. Now you're up to 84, just going from 5,000 to 4,800, from 78 to 84, just by cutting back on your expenses. But what if that's the expenses you want? What else could you do differently? I want to show you the impact if you get these kind of numbers just 2 years earlier, which means let's go back to age, well, let's leave it right here. 2 years early, if you started this and got to 50,000 2 years earlier, watch how this changes. Now you're up to 96. Isn't that incredible? If you just would have started 2 years earlier saving this, got to this amount at age 42 instead of age 44, could save this $400 a month and so on, everything else being equal. At age 65, you could retire and have a 90% chance of your money lasting until at least age 96. Now, we need to do something else here. We've changed a lot of variables here, showing you just how complex it can get. There's a lot of moving parts. But let's say you've reached retirement, and let's just say this is one of the spreadsheets we use here. Let's say you have the 658,000 here. I want to run this spreadsheet here. 600. Actually, I ran it at 635. Let's run 658,000. It's a whole nother spreadsheet, because this one here doesn't take into account your asset allocation. It doesn't take into account changing your COLAs, which is what we want to do with this spreadsheet right here. So we're just going to take a number because there's no way of knowing what your beginning balance is in the future. But let's say you're retired right now and you have this kind of money. You have 658,000. You need 5,000 a month coming from your nest egg, and you're leaving it all in the S&P 500. We're going to show you the different variables. We're going to change the asset allocation, but you left it all in the S&P 500. How would it work out? This is going to recalculate for every single year from 1925 on using the different returns. Again, we're assuming similar returns going forward. How many times would you run out of money in the last 100 years after the 20-year period? Looks like 9% of the time. This is a breakdown right here. This is what you have left up to 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years, given what the returns are for each of these different years. So we're kind of keying on the 20-year average here. So your money would last 91% of the time. Your money would last with these kind of numbers. 8% of the time, 8.6% time they would fail. When we go out to the 30-year period, it gets a little bit more times that they'd fail. This is the actual 20-year graph showing you most of the time you'd be just fine, just during the Depression years and during this stretch around the year 2000. Again, if you remember, we had 3 down years and another down year where really would have hurt with that scenario. Now, this is a 5.47% withdrawal rate, which is kind of high, a little bit more than the 4% rule. But again, we're leaving it all in the S&P 500. What happens if we go to a 60-40 split? How is that going to affect this 9% of the time? Again, this is after 20 years. Is it going to improve it or what? Watch what happens. Takes this a little bit for it to calculate. Now it's actually worst case scenario. What happens if you change your COLA? Again, if you change your COLA to not having a COLA after negative years. In other words, whenever you have a positive year, you can see it going down through here, it's going up by this 3% a year. But after you have a negative year, it actually, you don't give yourself a COLA. So if you had 4 down years, you'd have 4 years where you didn't change your COLA, didn't change the amount you were getting, you'd leave it. Let's see how that might change this 10%. Because right now it's a little bit concerning that, yes, 90% of the time you're okay, but 10% of the time you're not. Let's see if that 10% goes down. Just going that, changing that simple step. I'm just showing you all the different things we can do on this for you. Okay, now you're down to a 6% failure rate. The graph's looking a lot better. Just a couple of years during the Depression years and a couple of years during the year 2000 and 2001. Most years, folks, look at these numbers. You're going to be taking out a lot more. This is $1 million, $2 million, and so on. What are you starting out with? We're starting out with $658,000. This is with a 60-40 asset allocation. What happens if you go 70-30? Watch what happens. Let's go back and change it to no COLA. That was a 10% failure rate. What happens if we go to a 70-30 split? 70% staying in the S&P 500 because you really want to leave enough in there to take advantages of these, but you want to have a cash reserve, kind of a bucket over here, so when the market's going down, you can take advantage of that and not have these sums coming out of your nest egg. It's the S&P 500. It's already being knocked down. Okay, that did a 9%. Looks like it pretty much went from 10% down to 9%. What if we happens to eliminate the COLA again? This shows you all the different variables you need to take into account. Your asset allocation, whether you're going to change your COLA after down years, whether you're going to change how much you put in your bucket here. Let's go ahead and see if, okay, it went back down to 6%. Again, most years you're going to be just fine. It just happens to be if we have a really bad run like we did during the Depression years or like we had in the 2000s. That's the only time you have a problem with this kind of a scenario when you're taking out 5.47%. You have a 6% failure rate. What would it take to get to 100% success rate? Let's go to 4,500. That knocks your withdrawal rate down to 4.56. Watch what happens now. I think we're probably going to take care of at least the 2000s not having a failure. See if we might still have a problem during the Depression years. We just go to 4.56% withdrawal rate, which is granted $500 less. Now you have a 0% chance of failure. Right here, you got really, really low after 20 years, but the year 2000 get a little bit low, but you would not run out of money. This is considering the worst case scenarios. You do not run out of money after 20 years. After 30 years, it looks like you have a couple times, probably well, here it shows you right here, 1929 and 1930, you're running out of money. But that's if you take a 4.56% withdrawal rate, do a 70-30 asset allocation, and take no COLA after down years. But this kind of shows you how many variables you have to consider. And that's why I encourage you to watch this channel and see all the spreadsheets that we create. You can get a huge financial education that you're not going to get from anybody else because we run actual historical numbers. We don't do Monte Carlo simulations. We use what's actually happened over the last 100 years, which includes Depression type years. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Realize this is created for you. I'll run numbers for you. Just put in the comment section you want me to run some numbers, but you can learn from other people's numbers just as well as they can learn from your numbers. Please feel free to comment on any of this content because I love to create spreadsheets and make them best I can to run numbers for you the way you want them run. Please consider subscribing. Please share this channel with others. Let people know about this channel. And please like the video, and thanks so much for watching.